If your husband names your daughter after the woman he used to love before you, but you only find out years later, when a hairstylist looks at a family photo, goes totally silent, would you still call that a normal marriage? Taken aback. I never thought a routine hair appointment on some regular afternoon could turn into the starting point for me revisiting my entire marriage, like I was looking at a beautiful house from the outside, only to realize the walls had been rotting from the inside for ages. Quietly emotional. It all started last November. I found the salon through a friend. I figured I'd just try it once. At the time, my life was pretty simple, easy to label. I was 29. I had a husband, a little daughter. Busy days, quick dinners, weekday mornings where I made coffee in the same old kitchen. My kids' footsteps running across the hardwood, my husband's jacket casually draped over the dining chair like he'd never actually learned how to hang it up properly. Happy. I still thought I was lucky, not perfect, but warm. The first day I met her, I sat down, looked at the little name tag in the mirror, and couldn't help laughing. I told her it was kind of funny, because my daughter had the exact same name. Laughs softly. An old name, rare, not the kind you hear on a playground or around pre-K drop-off every day. A name I used to think was gentle, classic, with this quiet depth to it. I even said, basically, that it was weird running into a young woman like her who carried a name like that. American accent. She gave a small, polite smile. Very friendly, very easy. At the time, it was just a cute little detail. A tiny coincidence, enough to kick off harmless small talk between two strangers. Nothing more. After that, I went back to the salon a few more times. Somehow, I became one of her regular clients. I guess it was because she was really good with hair. Or maybe because at a certain age, women can find this sense of safety with another woman just from a calm voice and the way she listens without butting in. Calm. We weren't best friends. But there was something close to that between us. I told her normal stuff. That I had a husband. That his name was John. Of course, that wasn't his real name, but call him John. Okay. That we met about 6 years ago at work. That 3.5 years before we married. That there were days when I'd look at him holding our daughter and think, finally, we actually have a real family. I remember telling her that while she was brushing my hair. She just hummed in a polite way. No big curiosity, no prying. I liked that. I hate the feeling of someone digging through your private life. She wasn't like that. She basically just let me talk if I wanted to. Then, on another occasion, I mentioned the college John used to go to. Reflective XY. I don't even remember why I brought it up. Maybe we were talking about unfinished schooling. Or maybe because the people who'd lived around here long enough end up circling the same memories forever. But I'll never forget that moment. Her hand paused, just for a tiny beat. So small, I probably would have missed it if I wasn't looking in the mirror. Brief pause. She said she'd been there too, but later she dropped out. Slightly nervous. I thought, oh. So yeah, it really is a small town. Like eventually, every road has to cross somewhere. I didn't think much of it. I didn't see anything unusual. And sometimes, the scariest thing in life isn't when the truth is so good at disguising itself. It's when you're too comfortable to actually look closely. Serious. Last week, I went back to the salon like always. My mood was pretty good that day. We'd just come back from a short mini vacation, nothing fancy. Just a few days away from home, taking our daughter to the beach, snapping a couple photos in the sunshine, eating later dinners than usual, and pretending we were the kind of family that didn't have anything to worry about. I sat down, pulled out my phone, and, like any other mom, I showed her pictures. My daughter laughing. John and our daughter goofing around in the sand. The whole family standing together in the soft light of late afternoon. This kind of golden glow that makes everything look warmer, prettier, calmer than it really is. Then I showed one with John, and I saw her go silent. Stunned silence. Not the kind of silence where someone stops talking because they're focused. It was the silence of someone who just saw something that made the blood run cold. Breath catches. She still did my hair, still said nothing, still maintained perfect professionalism. But I'm a woman. I know when the air changes. I know when suddenly there's a secret between two people, something that wasn't there a minute ago. Tense. That night, I lay next to my husband and watched him sleep. John was exactly like always, broad shoulders, even breathing, one arm loosely thrown over the blanket. The face of a man I'd once believed was the safest place for my whole life. But for the first time in years, when I looked at him, something felt unfamiliar, quietly emotional. Not because I suspected he was cheating, not because I found a text message, or strange lipstick on his collar, or any of the dramatic stuff people like to associate with betrayal. It was that hairstylist's look at the picture. It wasn't the look you give a stranger. I told myself, don't spiral. John is a common name. This area isn't that big. People can recognize a face from somewhere just because they happen to pass through. I was just imagining things, stacking little details until they turned into some kind of conclusion. But women have this instinct that's hard to explain. Once something has rotted from the inside, you don't always name it right away, but you smell it first. Uneasy. I spent 2 days wrestling with myself. On the third day, I went back to the salon, determined. I didn't make some huge appointment. I just gave an excuse, like I wanted to adjust my bangs a little. Honestly, I wasn't going there for my hair. I went because I needed to hear the truth straight from her mouth. Or I needed someone to tell me I'd been overthinking for nothing. The salon was quiet that day. The blow-dryer noise was way off in the back. You could smell dye in the air. I sat down. She looked at me through the mirror. Maybe she knew I wasn't there for my hair. I asked, real softly, "Do you know my husband?" Holding back tears. Her hand stopped. Breath catches. I'll never forget that moment. It probably lasted only a few seconds. But in my memory, it stretched out like an entire winter. Deeply sorrowful. She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me in the mirror, like she was weighing kindness against cruelty, silence against honesty. Finally, she set the comb down. Her voice was so quiet, I had to sit perfectly still to catch it. Voice trembling with emotion. I think, your husband is my ex. Realization dawning. The world didn't collapse the way people always imagine it would. No explosion, no shattering glass, no screaming. Just this hollow feeling, like someone had quietly pulled the foundation out from under me, and my face still had to stay calm as I sat in the middle of a hair salon on a regular afternoon. Hushed tone. I asked for his full name. She told me. I asked where they used to know each other. She said they met in college. No, sorry, not just in college. She corrected herself. Years had passed, and things had started in school and then spilled into the area after, where people took part-time jobs, fell in love, fought, broke up, and moved on in the same orbit. I asked when they ended. She didn't go into details. She just said it ended really badly. I asked when she started to suspect something. She said it was when she heard me talk about John, about his work, about how we met about 6 years ago, about 3.5 years of marriage, about the college XY. She said at first she thought it was just coincidence, that she lived in the same area, that John was a common name, that people can have the same interests, the same age, the same school, the same stories, without it being the same person, until she saw the photo. And then she knew for sure. Dramatic reveal. I sat there with my hands tightly clasped beneath the hairdresser cape and felt something even more terrifying than the fact that my husband had an ex. The first detail that makes the whole thing. Our daughter had her exact name. Quietly. The name of that woman. The woman standing behind me right now. I looked up at my reflection in the mirror. A 29-year-old woman. A wedding ring. Faint circles under her eyes. This kind of calm women learn after being a wife and a mom, being the one who keeps the house from falling apart under lots of tiny but constant pressures. I heard myself ask a question, one I already knew in that exact moment would change how I remembered my entire life forever. He knew your name before he married me. Right? Anxious. She nodded. I didn't cry. I didn't snap at her either. Actually, the most pitiful person I saw in that moment was the girl behind me. I realized she'd been trying to stay quiet, trying to act proper, trying not to interfere in another woman's marriage, trying not to become the kind of villain everyone hates, the ex who randomly shows up and wrecks someone else's life. If she had been the one to bring it up first, I might have hated her. But she didn't. Bittersweet. I was the one who went back and asked. I left the salon in the strangest state I'd ever been in. Not numb so I couldn't walk, not shattered enough to collapse, just way too clear-headed. Breath trembles. I drove home and left the radio on, but didn't listen to anything. I parked in front of my house and sat there for almost 10 minutes with both hands on the steering wheel, looking out through the windshield without actually seeing. When I walked in, my daughter ran to me and hugged my leg, like always. Then I heard myself say my daughter's name. It popped out automatically. The name I'd said 1,000 times with all the pure love of a mother. But from that second on, for the first time in my life, it was no longer an innocent name. Emphasized. That night, I didn't talk to John. When he came home from work, he kissed my cheek lightly, asked what was for dinner, picked up our daughter, kissed her hair, and said her name in such a natural, familiar, loving voice. Each syllable felt like tiny needles piercing me, voice trembling. I looked at him, and memories started playing in reverse, in a way that was downright scary. Back then, when I was pregnant, we spent weeks deciding on our baby's name. I remember there was a little notebook where I wrote down all the names I liked, some modern, bright ones, some more common, easier to live with ones. And there were two I kept going back to. Our daughter's name, the one she has now, was one of them. That day, we were sitting in the kitchen. I set the notebook in front of me. John took the pen, crossed out a few names, then stopped on that one. He said he liked it. I asked why. He shrugged and smiled like it was obvious, said it was classic, gentle, rare, and something about it felt right to him. I remember hesitating. I remember leaning toward the other name more. Then John looked at me and said something that at the time felt completely normal. No, this one feels right. It feels like her. Quietly emotional. I thought he meant our unborn daughter. I thought that was just a father's intuition. I didn't know that years later, sitting in a hair salon, hearing some stranger admit she used to be her husband's ex, the line would come back like a cold, piercing dagger. It feels like her. Her? Who was her? Our daughter? Or another woman my husband had never truly left behind? Uneasy. That night, I barely slept. I lay next to my husband, listening to his breathing, and it felt like the bed itself didn't belong to me anymore. Deeply sorrowful. The next morning, I took my daughter to school. I cleaned the house. I did everything like normal. The more normal I acted, the more I felt like I was performing the role of my own wife. I didn't want to confront anything right away, not because I was cowardly, because I knew there are questions once you say them out loud. You can never take them back. So I started observing. John didn't seem off. Still went to work on time. Still talked to me like always. Still smiled when our daughter told him one of her silly little stories. Still the man I'd lived with for all those years. And maybe that was the worst part. Cheating is easy to spot when it comes with coldness, secrets, strange trips, dodging looks. But here, John stayed gentle, still responsible, still a good father. Only one truth had been slipped into my family like an invisible sharp object, something only I knew was there. Tense. 2 days later, when John was at work and my daughter was in class, I went up to the attic. We keep a ton of old boxes up there, old photos, old paperwork, the stuff people promise they'll sort out someday. And then it just sits there under layers of dust for seasons. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe I just needed something tangible, a way to prove I wasn't losing my mind. I rummaged through John's old college folders, some old hoodies, a yearbook, a few envelopes, a keepsake box I had never opened because I thought my husband's past, and frankly, anyone's past, deserved respect. Inside, there were old photos, old receipts, faded movie tickets, and a folded card. Not many words, just a few short lines written by hand. I didn't even need to read everything to recognize her name. I stood frozen in that dusty attic, my hands shaking, not from a hunch anymore. Stunned silence. Not from some weird coincidence anymore. Not from my anxiety after that look in the salon. It was proof that the woman had been real. Clearly, with a name, with handwriting, with memories my husband had kept tucked up here, hidden on the roof space where we stored things we'd somehow convinced ourselves didn't matter anymore. I don't remember how long I sat there. I just remember the shame arriving slowly but deeply. Not the kind of public shame people get when they find out they've been cheated in front of everyone. It was the shame of realizing I'd lived for years inside a story that wasn't entirely my own. Ashamed. That night, I waited until my daughter fell asleep. I placed the card on the dining table. John walked into the kitchen. Anna saw me sitting there and paused mid-step. He looked at the card. I looked at him. Then I asked, "Why does our daughter carry her name?" Emphasized. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. And I didn't circle around it. My calmness was what scared him. I could see it right in his eyes. Nervous breath. John stared at the card for a long time, then looked up. He asked where I found it. I said it didn't matter. I repeated the old question. Why is our daughter carrying her name? He denied it right away. Of course he did. He said I was reading too much into it. That he only ever liked the name. That just because someone has the same name doesn't automatically mean it's because of that person. That I was connecting random fragments into the cruelest conclusion possible. I listened to every word. Then I said her full name. I said I'd met her. I said she'd been the one doing my hair starting in November. That she was a regular client in the exact weird fate loop I'd walked into. That the woman had smiled when she found out my daughter had her name. And at that time, neither of us understood why that detail made people's skin go cold. I said I knew they'd known each other. I said I knew they'd ended badly. I said he went to XY. I said she'd also been there and dropped out. I said he met me at work about 6 years ago. I said we got married 3.5 years ago. I said all the things that first looked like coincidence finally lined up into one truth. At that point, John stopped denying. He sat down opposite me, and he seemed to age a few years right in front of my eyes. Some truths don't need to be screamed to become horrific. They just need a man to lower his head and stop lying. He said I was right. He'd loved her deeply. He said that happened before he met me. He said everything. When he dated me, when he married me, when we had a child. Those things were all real. I asked him if he still loved her. He was silent for way too long before answering, and that silence alone was answer enough to crush my heart. Voice trembling with emotion. Finally, he said something I'll probably never forget. He wasn't with her. He chose you. He built a life with you. But there are some people you can't fully forget. Breaking emotionally. I looked at him and felt my entire life get insulted by a single sentence. You can't fully forget. The man in front of me was trying to turn the most disgusting thing in marriage into some ordinary human weakness. I asked again. So, what about our daughter's name? He closed his eyes. He said he never intended to hurt me, that when he heard I liked that name too, he didn't change it, that he told himself it was just a pretty name, that later it would belong to our daughter, not to anyone else. I laughed. Laughs softly. It was the most terrifying laugh I'd ever let out. Because in that moment, I understood that sometimes it isn't the act of cheating. Sometimes it isn't leaving your wife and kids. Sometimes it isn't abandoning responsibility as a husband and father. But it can still destroy the dignity of a marriage through a very carefully hidden selfishness. Owing serious, I asked him, when he held our daughter for the first time, when he said her name for the first time, when he looked at me and said that name was perfect, did he think of someone else? John cried, visibly shaken. I'd never seen him cry like that. But his tears couldn't fix anything. Because I didn't need proof that he was hurt. I just needed to live with the truth that for all those years, the man sleeping next to me had left a different memory inside this family. Right in the middle. And I had never known. I didn't leave the house that day. Resigned. That's something a lot of people wouldn't understand. I didn't throw things. I didn't call my mom. I didn't post anything online. I didn't turn that night into some public storm for everyone to see. I just went upstairs to my daughter's room. She was asleep. One hand hugging a stuffed animal, hair spread across her pillow. The peaceful face of a child who had no idea about adult mistakes. I stood in the doorway for a long time. I had said that name 1,000 times before, with the purest kind of mother love. I said it when she learned to walk, when she had fevers in the middle of the night, when she came running into my arms after school, when I bent down and kissed her forehead, thinking, that name is so beautiful. It fits her so well. Now I still love my daughter with everything I've got. But that name no longer stands alone. Sad. The days that followed moved through this new kind of silence. John tried to talk, tried to apologize, tried to explain. He loved me, loved this family. He never betrayed me physically. He never contacted her again. That the past was the past. That the final name belonged to our daughter now, not to anyone else. I listened, but I didn't know how to respond to a kind of pain I still didn't even have words for. I understood cheating. I understood lying. But this was something else. Serious. This was the discovery that my husband didn't bring another woman into the house with his body. He brought her in with a name small enough that nobody suspects anything, soft enough to slip through any door, invisible enough to sit between family meals, in the birth certificate, on a birthday cake, in the way a father calls his child every night, and for nobody to notice. Until me. Until right now. A week later, the worst part happened. Dot a deep breath. I was folding clothes in the living room when my daughter ran over, looked up at me, and asked in a very small voice, "Mom, did I do something wrong?" Worried, I sat down in front of her right away. I asked why she thought that. She lightly grabbed her sleeve and said, "You don't say my name anymore." Breath trembles. I couldn't breathe for a second. I hadn't even realized I was starting to avoid saying my daughter's name. Not because I loved her less, not because I was mad at her, but because every time that name rose up to my lips, it felt like I was touching a shard of broken glass. Voice trembling. She looked at me with those confused eyes only a child has. one who can't understand why the air in the house has changed lately. I pulled her into my arms, and I almost fell apart right then, just breaking emotionally. That was when I understood the real guilt wasn't only that John couldn't fully forget an old flame. It was also that he let that can't fully forget thing reach our innocent child. After that day, I started trying to say my daughter's name normally again. I practiced it like you practice walking over a foot injury, one syllable at a time, pretending you're no longer limping. Determined. John stayed in the house. So did I. This is the kind of ending people rarely tell in stories because it's not clean enough to make listeners comfortable. I didn't pack a suitcase and leave in the middle of the night. I didn't forgive him either. Resigned. I just stayed. I stayed for my daughter. I stayed because I didn't yet know whether I wanted to destroy something or save something. And I stayed because sometimes women don't leave the instant their hearts shatter. We stay long enough to hear it break completely. Everything still continues on the surface. Breakfast still has coffee. She still goes to school. John still goes to work. I still swing by the supermarket on Friday afternoons. To outsiders, our family probably still looks fine, but only people living in a cracked-from-the-inside house understand that feeling. You're still sitting on the same couch. You still set plates down on the same dining table. You still tell your child good night. But you know something has changed the structure of everything. You can't see it. You can't fix it fast. And you can't pretend it never happened. I didn't go back to that salon again. Not because I hate her. Actually, I'm the opposite. I think if we'd swapped places, I'd probably hope another woman would treat me with the same carefulness and kindness she showed. She didn't destroy my marriage. She just happened to shine a light, accidentally, into a place that had been dark for a long, long time. And John? He's still here. Still our daughter's father. Still the man I loved enough to build an entire life around. There are evenings when he calls our daughter's name from down the hallway, and I feel cold all over, just a little, even though I sit still and act normal. Cold. There are times when he looks at me like he wants to say more, but we both know that once certain doors open, you can't close them the old way anymore. I don't know where my marriage will go from here. I don't know if there will come a day when I look at him and that sentence finally stops echoing in my head. It feels like her. Hopeful ending. I just know the most painful part of marriage isn't always getting lied to by actions. Sometimes, the most painful thing is realizing you've spent years living next to a memory that never really belonged to you. And even worse is when that memory has a name. A name I said with all the love of my life. A name that still echoes every day inside this house. And every time it echoes, I understand there are marriages that don't end in divorce. They end with everything still being intact, but nothing staying whole. Quiet reflection.